Welcome back to Squawk Box this morning. For more on the coronavirus impact on the real estate market, we are now joined by related Companies CEO Jeff Blau. He oversees a $97 billion portfolio, both residential and commercial, and has got his fingers on the pulse of all of it. Jeff, it's great to talk to you this morning. Help us understand what you're hearing. How many tenants, either residential or commercial, are calling up and saying, I can't pay the rent this month?
Good morning, Andrew. How are you? So it's been interesting times.
Great to talk to you.
Yes. As you can imagine, we were all waiting for April 1st to see what was going to happen. And I actually think the results have been pretty good so far. We own assets, residential, commercial, retail, and obviously it's different across those asset classes. On the residential side, we wound up collecting, so far it's only a couple days in, about 88% of the rent that was due. On the commercial side, about 95%. Obviously, our hotels are closed and not producing any revenue. And on the retail side, about 26% of our tenants have paid so far. I think the important thing here is corporations on the corporate side, on the retail side, those companies that have capability, have liquidity, have a strong balance sheet, I think they need to pay the rent. And the same goes on the residential side. You know, we have tenants that many of our tenants still have jobs and have not been directly impacted financially, and it's their obligation to pay their rent. On the other hand, some people have lost their jobs, and it's our obligation to work with them. And I ultimately think that's how this is going to play out through the system. I think what's not okay is when you have large companies, whether it's retail or corporate, that suddenly send blanket letters to their landlords and say, we're not going to pay the rent. But, you know, there's an instance, you have a blue chip law firm that charges $1,000 an hour in good times, has been very profitable, and they suddenly decide that they don't want to pay the rent. I don't think that's okay right now. It's a whole ecosystem, and the people that can pay need to pay. Landlords need to help out those that can't, and then the banks need to help out those landlords that are hurt by people that couldn't pay the rent. And that's how this whole thing, I think, has to get resolved.
Let me ask you, just because you've raised something that I have heard anecdotally about companies trying to take advantage of this situation, those that are in a position to pay that aren't. How much of that are you seeing right now?
Well, look, I mean, take the retail industry, which has obviously been one of the hardest hit. Malls are closed. For us at Hudson Yards, our retail center is closed. At Time Warner Center, obviously, all closed. I think that we have a mix there of startup companies and restaurants that have been really hurt by what's happened and are struggling, and they're going to have a tough time paying their rent. And you know, we're going to work with them, right? We're going to help them figure out a payment plan or whatever needs to get done, and hopefully our lenders and partners will work with us so that we can accommodate them. On the other side, you have very strong tenants, not necessarily in our centers, but across the board: Nike, Adidas, Estee Lauder, TJ Maxx, Apple, Burlington. Those tenants, they need to pay, even though they're closed, right? They have the capacity. This is society's issue. Everybody's going to get hurt a little bit, and those that can pay need to pay. And, actually, there was an interesting... There was an interesting event.
Can I ask you, though, any of the companies that you just mentioned, have they sent you letters like that saying they don't want to pay?
Some of those tenants have sent letters to their landlords.
That's fascinating.
In Germany, Adidas sent a letter to all their landlords, and ultimately there was a public shaming of Adidas, and they retracted the letters and they paid their rent. And I think that's what we have to be careful of today. This is not an excuse for people to not pay rent.
Longer term, just real quick, how concerned are you about how long this goes on for? Are you thinking about June, July, and August and thinking that people are going to be back in Hudson Yards, going to Sweet Green, doing retail shopping, or are you thinking that that's pushed off much farther? We keep hearing very differing accounts from health experts and other people. Right.
So, I've been watching your show the last hour or so, and it's really everything you're talking about. I think it's going to be a phase-in back to normalcy. I don't think they're going to turn a switch and everybody's going to suddenly show up in the restaurants and retail. I ultimately think people will go back to work. I think people are feeling cooped up and want to get back home, back to work. Zoom only works so well, and it's hard to do your business over WebEx and Zoom. And so I think people are looking forward to getting back to the office, and I think there'll be precautions. Some of the things that we did at Hudson Yards early on, I actually think are going to become more commonplace. So you can enter our buildings pre-approved through security. You don't need to interact with somebody. You clear our turnstiles by waving your hand. You can press the elevator button on your iPhone instead of touching anything. And I think that more of those technological solutions will become commonplace in the industry.
Right. And Jeff, we also want to thank you for this phone call, but also want to thank you for the work that you're doing to help New Yorkers. We just put up on the screen some of the relief efforts that you guys have undertaken, and it's important because you're getting food out to those on the front line, and we're grateful for that. Jeff, thank you so very much for joining us, and I hope we can continue this conversation in the future because you are on the front lines of so much of it.